I've been running loads up and down the spine of the Appalachians for 9 on 15 years by then, ever since I dropped out of community college and figured trucking was as good a way as any to see the world without ever really leaving home. Home being a little holler outside Bristol, Virginia, where the mountains crowd in like old kinfolk who won't give you space to breathe. That night in October, I think it was '09 or maybe 10, the years blur together like fog on the windshield. I was hauling a flatbed of fresh tip pine from a mill up near Galax, headed south on Route 52 toward Wyville. The contract was tight, had to make Charlotte by dawn or I'd eat the penalty. But the rain had other ideas. It started as a drizzle when I left the mill, the kind that slicks the roads just enough to make your tires hum a warning. By the time I crossed into North Carolina, it was a full-on deluge, sheets of water hammering the cab like buckshot on tin. My old Kenworth was holding up, but the wipers were fighting a losing battle, slapping back and forth with that rhythmic squeak that gets under your skin after a while. Visibility was down to maybe 30 feet, the high beams cutting silver tunnels through the black, picking out guardrails and the occasional reflector post. The mountains loomed on either side, invisible but felt, like giants breathing down your neck. No radio signal out there, nothing but static and the ghost of a country station fading in and out, some old Hank Williams tune warbling about being so lonesome he could cry. Fitting, I suppose. I'd been divorced 3 years by then, kids grown and gone, so it was just me and the road most nights. I remember checking the clock on the dash, 11:47 p.m., and feeling that bone-deep tiredness settle in, the kind where your eyelids feel like lead weights and every bump jars you back to half awake. Coffee from the thermos was cold and bitter, but I sipped it anyway, trying to shake off the fog in my head. The load was secured tight, chains rattling faintly over the potholes, but in weather like that, you worry. A shift in the lumber, a hydroplane on a curve, and you'd be over the edge, tumbling down into one of those steep ravines where they don't find you for days. I'd heard stories from other drivers at the truck stops, guys who'd seen wrecks where the cab was crushed like a beer can, or worse, where the driver just vanished, rig and all, swallowed by the woods. Around midnight, the rain picked up even harder, if that was possible. Thunder rumbled distant, like artillery fire echoing through the valleys. I eased off the gas, dropping to 40, then 35. No other traffic. Folks with sense were hunkered down in their homes, wood stoves crackling, while idiots like me chased deadlines through the storm. The road twisted sharper here, hugging the flanks of the Blue Ridge, with drop-offs that plunged hundreds of feet into blackness. I passed a sign for a rest area up ahead. Nothing fancy, just a pull-off with a couple picnic tables and a porta-john tucked into a clearing off the highway. Figured I'd park there, kill the engine for an hour or two, let the worst of the squall pass. Sleep in the sleeper berth if I could, though with the rain drumming on the roof, that was a tall order. I pulled in around 12:30, the gravel crunching under the tires as I maneuvered the rig into the far end of the lot, away from the entrance in case any other fools showed up. The place was deserted, just a sodium lamp flickering weakly over the trash bins, casting orange pools on the wet pavement. Trees crowded the edges, pines and oaks swaying in the wind, branches whipping like they were alive and angry. I shut her down, the diesel grumbling to a stop, and for a moment the silence was deafening. Then the rain took over, a constant roar that drowned out everything else. I leaned back in the seat, hat pulled low over my eyes, and tried to drift off. My mind wandered to the usual places, ex-wife's new husband, the mortgage on the trailer back home, how the doc had told me to watch my blood pressure or I'd end up like my old man, keeled over at 52 from a heart attack behind the wheel. Sleep came in fits, broken by the gust shaking the cab. Around 3 a.m., I know because I glanced at the clock when I stirred. I heard it, a creak, metal on metal, like the passenger door latch giving way. At first I chalked it up to the wind. These old trucks settle and groan in bad weather. But then came the click, unmistakable, the door opening. I sat up sharp, heart kicking in my chest, fumbling for the flashlight under the seat. No way someone was out there. Who'd be wandering in this mess? Bear, maybe? I'd heard of them nosing around rest areas, but not popping doors. I flicked on the interior light, and there she was, climbing up into the cab like it was the most natural thing, water streaming off her in rivulets. A woman, maybe 30, 35, in a faded calico dress that clung to her like a second skin, soaked through. Her hair was plastered dark against her scalp, face pale as milk under the dome light. Bare feet, no shoes, toes curling against the rubber mat as she pulled the door shut behind her. The cab filled with the smell of wet earth and something sharper, like ozone after lightning.
She didn't look at me, just settled into the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead through the windshield into the rain. I blinked hard, wondering if I was dreaming or if that thermos coffee had gone bad. "Ma'am, you all right?" I asked, voice rough from sleep. No answer. She just sat there, dripping onto the upholstery, the water pooling around her feet. I could see her chest rising and falling, slow and steady, but her eyes, God, her eyes were fixed on nothing, like she was looking at a horizon only she could see. "You need help? Hospital or something? Ain't no place for a lady out in this." Still nothing, not a nod, not a glance. The rain hammered louder, or maybe it was my pulse in my ears. I thought about calling it in on the CB, but the radio had been spotty all night, and besides, what would I say? Woman appeared out of nowhere, won't talk? They think I was drunk or crazy. She didn't seem hurt, no blood, no bruises, just wet and silent. I waited a minute, too, the awkwardness building like static electricity. Finally I sighed, keyed the ignition. The engine roared to life, headlights stabbing into the downpour. "All right then, I'll drop you at the next exit. Gas station there, you can call someone." She didn't protest, didn't move. I eased the rig back onto the highway, the tires hissing on the wet asphalt. The road ahead was a blur, curves coming up fast in the reduced speed. I kept glancing over, expecting him to say something, anything. Her dress was old-fashioned, like something from a thrift store or a grandma's closet. Floral print faded to gray, hem frayed. No purse, no jewelry, just a thin silver chain around her neck with a locket that caught the dash lights. Her skin was clammy looking, veins blue under the surface, like she'd been out in the cold too long. The cab heater was blasting, but she didn't shiver, didn't rub her arms, just stared. We drove like that for what felt like hours, though the odometer said only 10 miles. The rain eased a bit, enough that I could make out the shapes of barns and silos off to the side, ghosting by in the dark. My mind raced. Hitchhiker, runaway, maybe escaped from somewhere, traumatized. I'd picked up strays before, kids thumbing to the city, drifters with sob stories, but never like this, never this quiet. I tried talking, filling the silence. "Name's Harlan, been trucking since I was your age, probably. You from around here, Wytheville, Bland County?" No response. Her breathing was the only sound besides the engine and the wipers. Shallow, rhythmic. I noticed then how the water from her wasn't evaporating. The seat should have been drying under the heat, but it glistened wet, droplets trickling down the vinyl. A chill crept up my spine, unrelated to the weather. Something felt off, like the air in the cab had thickened, pressing in. I cracked my window an inch, let him in the scent of pine and mud, but it didn't help. The next exit loomed up, Interstate 77 junction, with a Shell station lit up like a beacon. I signaled, pulled off, the rig bouncing over the ramp. "Here we are. You can get dry inside. Use the phone." I rolled under the canopy, brakes sighing as we stopped by the pumps. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and yellow. I turned to her, and the seat was empty. No woman, no water, no nothing. Just the empty passenger side, dry as bone. My stomach dropped, a cold sweat breaking out. I leaned over, touched the seat, cool, untouched. Door was locked from inside, hadn't opened. I scrambled out and circled the rig in the rain, checking under the chassis, behind the wheels. No footprints in the mud puddles, no sign anyone had been there. The attendant inside the station, a kid with acne and a name tag reading Kyle, hadn't seen a soul pull in besides me. Back in the cab, shaken now. I sat there staring at the dash. That's when I saw it, my Bible, the one my mama gave me before she passed, sitting open on the console. I never left it like that. I always kept it tucked in the glove box. The pages were turned to Matthew 25, the parable about helping the stranger. "For I was a stranger, and you took me in." A verse underlined in faded ink, but not by me. My hands trembled as I closed it, shoved it away. I made Charlotte that morning, unloaded the lumber in a daze, told no one, but it didn't end there. Every time it rains hard, like that night, I see them, wet handprints on the inside of the passenger window, small and delicate, pressing against the glass. They fade when the sun comes out, but they're always back with the next storm. I've sold that rig, bought a new one, but it follows. Sometimes, late at night on those mountain roads, I swear I hear the door creak, feel the cab shift like someone's climbing in. I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore, and I wonder, who was she? A ghost? A warning? Or just my mind cracking under the loneliness of the long haul? Whatever it is, the rain brings her back, and I'm left driving through it and glancing at that empty seat, waiting for the stare that never comes. The mountains keep their secrets, and some nights I think they've claimed a piece of mine too.
I'd been running I-81 since the days when it was still 2 lanes in spots, and the CB was full of handles like Rubber Duck and Big Mama. By the spring of 2014, I knew every curve between Bristol and Stoughton like the lines on my own palm. Folks called me preacher on account of the little wooden cross I kept hanging from the mirror, though I hadn't set foot in a church since Daddy's funeral. That night I was northbound out of Abingdon with a belly dump full of Crusher Run gravel headed for a job site up near Lexington. Load paid good, and I was trying to make it in one pull so I could sleep in my own bed for a change. The weather had different plans. It started raining sideways by the time I hit Marion. Not the gentle mountain mist we're used to. This was a hard, angry rain that turned the interstate into a river. My wife was run high and still losing the fight. Traffic thinned out quick. Only fools and freight dogs like me kept rolling. Around 12:50 a.m. I passed mile marker 117, the one just past the rural retreat exit. I noticed it because the guardrail there has always had this big crescent dent in it, like somebody kissed it hard with a trailer years ago.
The marker itself is bent a little to the left, green paint chipped, numbers standing out white. I'd seen that dent 1,000 times, always gave it a little nod like greeting an old enemy. I kept rolling. Radio was nothing but gospel stations bleeding in and out, so I clicked it off and listened to the rain drumming on the roof and the gravel shifting in the trailer every time I touched the brakes. Felt my eyes getting heavy, so I cracked the window, let the cold, wet air slap me awake. Smelled like creek water and wet leaves. Clock read 1:14 when I glanced down, and there it was again, mile marker 117. Same dent, same chipped paint, same crooked lean. I blinked hard, thinking I'd dozed and dreamed the last 13 minutes. But the odometer said I'd gone almost 12 miles. I laughed at myself, shaky. Getting old, preacher, I muttered. Figured I was more tired than I thought. By 1:27, the laugh was gone, because there it was a third time. Same marker, same everything. The rain had let up just enough that I could see the reflector posts clear, and they were the same ones I'd passed twice already. My stomach turned over like I'd swallowed creek stones. I eased off the throttle, let the Jake brake growl, and coasted onto the shoulder right past the marker. Sat there idling, hazard lights blinking, trying to talk myself calm. Could be a prank, somebody moving signs. Could be I'd had a micro-sleep and looped somehow. Could be anything except what my gut was screaming. I grabbed the mag light from under the seat, pulled my rain jacket on, and stepped out. The shoulder was soft, water running in rivulets across the asphalt. I walked back maybe 30 yards, boots squelching, light kind of tunnel through the dark. The marker was gone. Not bent over, not knocked down, gone. Just 2 holes in the ground where the posts had been, mud washed smooth around them like they'd been pulled clean hours ago. But the guardrail dent was still there, fresh silver metal shining where the rain had washed the rust away. I stood staring, feeling the mountains pressing in from both sides, black walls of pine and rock swallowing the light. That's when I saw the tracks. Wide duals, same tread pattern as my own drive tires, cutting sharp off the shoulder and disappearing into the woods where nothing but a wall of laurel and poplar ought to be. No logging road, no fire break, nothing on any map I'd ever seen. The tracks were fresh, mud still sliding into the ruts, water not even settled yet. My mouth went dry. I swung the light along them and the beam shook in my hand because I could see my own rig's tracks, clear as day, turning off the highway and heading straight into the trees. I don't know why I followed them. Should have climbed back in the cab, called dispatch, called the state police, called somebody, but something in me needed to know. I told myself I'd just go far enough to see where the joke ended. The woods closed over me quick. Branches slapped my face, soaked my sleeves. The flashlight beam bounced off wet trunks and hanging vines, and the smell was thick, rich earth and rotting leaves and something metallic I couldn't place. The track stayed straight, no hesitation, like the driver knew exactly where he was going. After maybe 50 yards, the ground sloped down gentle into a little hollow I'd never known was there. And that's where I saw her. My rig. My silver Freightliner with the faded preacher stenciled on the doors, sitting nose down in the hollow, engine idling low, headlights off, driver's door hanging open, rain dripping off the grab bars, gravel still in the trailer, chains still tight. I stopped dead, light frozen on the cab, couldn't breathe, because I was standing right there holding the keys in my left hand, the rain cutting into my palm where I'd been squeezing it. The cab light was on inside, weak and yellow, and the seat was empty. I don't remember walking the last 20 steps. Just suddenly I was there, reaching for the open door, shining the light across the seat, the floorboards, the sleeper. Nothing. No mud, no water, no sign anybody had been driving. The GPS was still on, screen glowing soft, showing my location as exactly mile marker 117 on I-81. I backed away slow, sweeping the light around the hollow. No footprints leading away, no drag marks, just my own boot prints coming in, and the truck's tire tracks ending right where the rig sat. I climbed in, hands shaking so bad I could barely grip the wheel. The seat was warm, not hot, just body warm, like someone had been sitting there minutes ago. The mirrors were adjusted for my height, the radio still off, the coffee cup I'd been drinking from still half full and cold in the holder. I looked in the sleeper, half expecting to see myself lying there dead or asleep. Empty. I killed the engine, sat in the sudden silence listening to rain on the roof and my own heartbeat. Then I started it again, threw it in gear, and followed my own tracks back out. They led straight to the shoulder where I'd left. Well, where the other me had left the highway. When I pulled back onto I-81, the marker was there again, 117, bent and chipped, dent in the guardrail shining. The clock read 1:29, 2 minutes since I'd stopped the first time. I drove north doing 90 until the sun came up over Shenandoah. Didn't stop till I hit the Petra and Rafine and sat in the restaurant shaking while the waitress kept refilling my coffee. Told the lot lizards and the other drivers some lie about a blowout. Never told a soul the truth until now. I still run I-81, a man's gotta eat. But when the forecast calls for rain, I take the long way up 52 and 60, even if it adds 3 hours. Some nights when the wipers are going, and the road shines black ahead, I catch something in the mirror, just a flicker. My own rate running a few seconds behind me. Headlights dark, following quiet. I don't look long, and I never, ever slow down for mile marker 117. Because whatever's driving that second truck knows the way better than I do. And one of these storms it's gonna beat me to the turn. And I'm afraid of where it wants to take me next.
I hadn't gone by Earl in so long the name felt like it belonged to somebody else, somebody younger and meaner who died somewhere back in the 90s. These days I answered to Cottonmouth, a handle I earned after I bit a state trooper's hand during a logbook check outside Knoxville. Folks on the CB just laughed and let it stick. By the fall of 2017, I was 48, twice divorced, hauling produce out of Florida, headed north on I-77 through Fancy Gap. The run paid decent and kept me moving, which was all I asked. That night, the sky cracked open somewhere above Mount Airy and never closed again. Rain came down in buckets, then barrels, then whole damn creeks. My wipers were on frantic and still losing ground. The highway was empty except for me and the occasional brave or stupid. I'd been rolling since Jacksonville at sunup, 21 hours with only catnaps at Shippers, and the coffee had gone sour hours ago. The load of oranges was starting to sweat in the reefer. I could smell the citrus mixing with diesel and wet dog from the blanket I kept behind the seat. Channel 19 was dead except for the usual bleed over of some fire and brimstone preacher out of Charlotte promising hellfire to fornicators and lottery players. I let it hiss and pop, too tired to change it. Around 2:15 a.m. I crested the ridge just south of the bridge over the Ararat River. The road dropped steep there, a long S-curve with nothing but guardrail and a 200-foot plunge on the right. I'd run it 1,000 times, sober, drunk, and half dead, never gave it a second thought. That's when the voice came through, clear as Sunday dinner. "Earl, slow down. Bridge is out." No handle, no static, no click of a mic key. Just those 5 words, calm and close, like the speaker was sitting right beside me with his lips to my ear. I damn near dropped my drink. Nobody alive knew me as Earl. Not dispatch, not the logbook, not even the ex-wife who took the house and the dog. I'd buried that name the same night I buried everything else connected to it. My foot came off the throttle on instinct, the Jake brake growling low as I coasted down through the gears. I keyed the mic twice, nothing to say, just needing to hear my own voice. "Say again, Breaker." Static answered. The preacher came back, ranting about Sodom. I tried once more. "Who's on 19? Identify." Nothing. I was still doing 60 when the headlights caught the first mist, then the orange glow of barrels and flares. The whole bridge was gone. Not damaged, gone. The river had risen 20 feet and taken the center span clean away, leaving nothing but black water rushing between jagged ends of concrete and rebar. A state trooper's cruiser sat sideways with its light bar strobing red and blue into the rain, but no officer in sight. I stood on the brakes. The trailer locked, tires howled, and I slid sideways in a cloud of steam before the ABS caught and hauled me to a stop 10 feet from the drop. My heart was trying to punch its way out of my chest. I sat there, breathing diesel fumes and orange peel, staring at the hole where the road used to be. After a minute, I grabbed the mic again, hands shaking so bad I could barely hold it. "Thank you, whoever that was. You just saved my life." I waited. Rain hammered the roof like it wanted in. Then the voice came back, softer, almost sad. "You buried me under that bridge in '98, Earl." The words went through me colder than eddy wind off the mountain. I dropped the mic like it burned. The cab filled with the smell of wet earth and something coppery I didn't want to name. I killed the engine, climbed down into the floodlights and rain, and walked to the edge. The trooper was down on the bank, waving me back, shouting something lost in the roar of water. I couldn't hear him. All I could hear was that voice, and the memory had dragged up with it. His name had been Travis McCowan. We'd run team out of Chattanooga back when I was still Earl Ray Gentry and thought I was invincible. Travis was younger, 26, fresh out of prison for boosting cars, always laughing, always borrowing money he couldn't pay back. One night outside Bluefield, we got into it over a woman neither of us would ever see again. Whiskey and pride did the talking. I don't remember the fight clear, just flashes. The sound of gravel under boots, his head hitting the guardrail, the way his eyes went still while the river rushed below. I told myself it was an accident, told myself he'd slipped, wrapped him in a tarp, weighted it with chain, and rolled him over the edge where the river was running high after spring rains. Never found him, they said. Kern took him all the way to Carolina, they said. I changed my name, grew the beard, moved 3 states south, and never looked back. Until that voice on Channel 19. I stood there getting soaked while the trooper yelled and the water roared. My logbook was going to be trashed, the load ruined, but none of it mattered. I climbed back in the cab, hands numb, and stared at the radio like it might bite. I reached for the power knob, then stopped. One more time, I keyed the mic. "Travis." Nothing but his. "I'm sorry." And my voice cracked like green wood in a fire. Silence. Then the faintest whisper, almost lost under the rain. "Too late for sorry, Earl." I unplugged the radio right then, yanked the coaxial clean out of the back, and threw the whole unit in the sleeper. Been unplugged ever since. Dispatch thinks I'm just old school, like running paper logs and paper maps. They don't correct them. Some nights when the rain sets in hard and I'm rolling those same mountain miles, I swear I can still smell river mud in the cab. Sometimes the hair on my arm stands up, and I feel someone sitting in the jump seat watching me. I never look over. I just keep the hammer down and pray the road stays under my wheels. Because bridges wash out, men drown, and some deaths don't care how many years you put between you and the water. They just wait for the right storm to speak your real name again. I'd been running coal out of the southern West Virginia fields for 12 years by then, long enough to know every curve on 77 and most of the lies the dispatchers tell. Folks on the CB call me Bear because I'm built like one and growl when I'm tired, which is most of the time. That night in early March 2011, I was northbound with 42 ton of metallurgical sitting in the hopper, trying to beat a storm that had been chasing me since Bluefield. The sky finally caught up outside Beaver, rain coming sideways so hard it felt like the mountain itself was throwing gravel at the windshield. Visibility dropped to nothing. I couldn't see past the hood ornament. My eyes burned, my back ached, and the coffee in the thermos had gone cold hours ago. I just wanted a plate of eggs and a dry place to sit for 20 minutes. Around 2 a.m., the neon appeared out of the dark like a mirage, a little rectangle of pink and turquoise that spelled out Hilltop Diner, open. I'd run this stretch more times than I can count and never seen it before, but exhaustion makes you grateful for anything that glows. The parking lot was gravel and mud, already half full of rigs, mostly older Kenworths and Petes with faded paint and no company logos. I nosed in between a rusty W900 and a beat-up Pete with Tennessee plates, killed the engine, and sat there a second, listening to the rain drum on the roof. Something felt off even then, but I was too tired to listen to instinct. I pulled my cap low, grabbed my wallet, and made a run for the door. The bell over the door jingled like it hadn't been oiled since Truman was president. Inside smelled of bacon grease, wet wool, and something underneath that reminded me of creek mud after a body's been in it too long. The place was dim, just a few fluorescent tubes buzzing overhead and neon beer signs that had mostly given up. Booths along the windows, counter with spinning stools, chrome everywhere dulled by years of cigarette smoke that still clung to the walls, even though nobody'd been allowed to light up inside for decades. Jukebox in the corner was playing something slow and mournful, Patsy Cline, I think, but the record skipped every few bars like it was stuck in a loop. Every stool and booth was taken. Maybe 20, 25 men, all truckers by the look of them. Flannel shirts, billed caps, work boots. Nobody talking, nobody even chewing loud, just the quiet clink of silverware and the hiss of the grill back in the kitchen. I stood there dripping on the mat, waiting for somebody to notice me, but no heads turned. Finally, a waitress came out from behind the counter, mid-40s maybe, hair teased up hair the color of nicotine, uniform the same pink as the neon outside. Name tag said Doris. She smiled like she'd been expecting me. "Sit anywhere you like, honey," she said, voice syrupy sweet with that deep mountain drawl. "Coffee's hot." I took the only empty stool, right in the middle of the counter. The two men on either side of me didn't shift over, didn't nod, didn't do anything except keep eating. Up close I saw the mud on their boots, red clay, same as the banks of the New River after a hard rain, and every single one of them had a tear in the left knee of their jeans. Same size, same fray. The man to my right had a John Deere cap pushed back on his head. His fingernails were black half-moons, like he'd been digging in that same clay. The coffee came without me asking, poured into a thick white mug that had a chip on the rim. It tasted exactly like creek water looks, iron and leaf rot and something else I couldn't name. I drank it anyway. I tried small talk with Doris while she refilled cups down the line. "Never seen this place before. Y'all new?" She just smiled wider, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, and said, "Been here forever, honey. You just ain't never needed us till tonight." The jukebox skipped again, same 3 notes of crazy, over and over. Nobody seemed to mind. I ordered eggs over easy, hash browns, bacon extra crisp. Food came quick, too quick, and it was perfect. Eggs runny in the middle, bacon curled just right, but every bite tasted faintly of that creek water coffee. That's when I started really looking around. All the men had the same hands, thick knuckles, same scars across the backs like they'd all grabbed the same barbed wire fence at the same time, same watch tan on the left wrist, same faded tattoo of an anchor half hidden under flannel sleeves, same 5 o'clock shadow that looked like it never grew past that length. I caught my reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser and for a second thought I saw my own face staring back from one of the booths. Same tired eyes, same gray in the beard I hadn't started growing yet. I blinked and it was gone. The quiet started pressing in. Not peaceful quiet, wrong quiet, like the whole diner was holding its breath. Silverware stopped moving, but no sound of it. Booths shifting, but no scrape on the linoleum. Even the rain outside had gone muffled, like someone turned the volume down on the world. I set my fork down slow, heart starting to thump heavy. Doris was back, wiping the counter in slow circles, watching me with that same smile. "Check please, ma'am," I said, trying to sound casual. She slid a green ticket across without looking at it. Total came to $4.25. I laughed under my breath. Hadn't seen prices like that since I was a kid. Dropped a 10 on the counter and told her to keep it. When I stood up, every man in the place stood with me. Slow, like one organism. Chairs didn't scrape, boots didn't thud. Just 25 bodies rising in perfect silence, all facing me. The ones in the booths turned their heads at the exact same angle. I turned mine.
The man with the John Deere cap took one step forward, then another, mud falling off his boots and wet clumps that made no sound when they hit the floor. I don't remember deciding to run. I was just suddenly moving, shoulder checking the door so hard the bell screamed. Rain hit me like ice water. I slipped in the gravel, went down hard on one knee, felt the skin split, but I was up again before the pain registered. Behind me, the diner door stayed shut, but I could feel them watching through the glass. I yanked my driver's door open, climbed in, fired the engine. The lot was empty now except for my rig. No other trucks, no lights in any of the cabs I'd parked beside, just puddles reflecting that pink neon and the word open still glowing like a lie. I pulled back onto 77 doing 70 before I hit the end of the ramp, tires throwing rooster tails of water. Didn't slow down till Beckley city limits, heart hammering so hard I thought I'd stroke out. Pulled into the TA, left the engine running, and sat under the floodlights shaking till dawn. When the sun came up, I walked back to the logbook to write up desk with the receipt still in my shirt pocket. Green paper, faded ink, dated March 14th, 1973. Same day my daddy rolled his gold truck off the side of Fancy Gap and was never found. I was 12 years old. I still have that receipt taped inside my logbook. Some nights when the rain sets in hard and the wipers can't keep up, I smell bacon grease and creek water in the cab. Sometimes miles from anywhere, that pink neon flickers in the mirror for just a second before the next curve takes it away. I don't stop anymore. I just keep rolling, because I know what's waiting if I ever pull over hungry again. The hilltop never closes. It just waits for the right kind of rain and the right kind of lonely.
I was running empty southbound on 52 out of Bland, Virginia, trying to get to the house before the weather turned ugly. December 2019, the week before Christmas. The load I dropped in Roanoke paid quick, and I was looking forward to a couple days off. Maybe drink a little bourbon and pretend I still had family to visit. The sky had been low and mean all afternoon, but around dusk it let go. Rain came down so hard the highway looked like a black river with yellow stripes painted on it. My wipers were on high and still losing the fight. I turned the radio off hours earlier. Nothing but holiday ads and preachers yelling about the end times. The only sound was the diesel growling and the rain trying to punch holes through the roof. I was maybe 10 miles past Bastion when I saw her. At first I thought it was a deer caught in the headlights, something pale moving at the edge of the beam. Then the shape sharpened into a little girl standing on the white line, barefoot in the downpour, one arm raised like she was hailing a school bus that never came. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10, soaked to the bone, hair plastered dark against her skull. In her other hand, she held a fistful of green leaves and yellow fruit, Mayapples, which made no kind of sense because Mayapples die with the first frost, and it was 20-something days to Christmas. I hit the brakes hard enough to lock the belts. The trailer fishtailed once before the ABS caught it, and I rolled to a stop with the hazards blinking. No parent in sight, no house lights, just miles of wet pine and mountain dropping away into nothing. I've got a daughter myself, grown now and won't speak to me, but the thought of any child out in that mess twisted something in my chest. I leaned across and cranked the passenger window down 2 inches. "Hey, sweetheart, you lost? Where's your mama?" She didn't answer right away, just walked up to the cab, slow, bare feet slapping the wet pavement. When she got close, I could see her dress was old-fashioned, pale blue with tiny flowers, hem dragging and heavy with water. Her eyes were big and gray, the kind of gray you see in creek ice right before it breaks. She raised the Mayapples toward the window. "Want one, mister? They're sweet." I told her no thank you. I needed to get her warm and dry, told her to climb in. She did it easy, like she'd ridden in 100 rigs, grabbing the oh-shit handle with little muddy fingers and pulling herself up. The cab filled with the smell of wet clay and something greener, like crushed stems. She settled in the passenger seat, knees together, Mayapples resting in her lap. Water dripped off her in steady streams, but the seat wasn't getting wet the way it should. I noticed that later. "What's your name, honey?" "Ruthie," she said, voice soft as creek pebbles. "You going to Granny's house?" I laughed, uneasy. "Afraid not, darling. I'm headed to North Carolina, but I'll take you somewhere safe. Police station, maybe, or a church." She turned those gray eyes on me and smiled, small and knowing. "You will be," she said again, like I hadn't understood the first time. I asked where she lived. She pointed vaguely out the windshield into the dark and rain. I asked how she got out here. She just shrugged and started peeling one of the Mayapples with a thumbnail. The fruit inside was pale yellow, almost glowing, smelled like summer, even though the heater was blowing cold December air. I pulled back onto the road slow, watching for a house or a driveway, anything. There was nothing but guardrail and mountain. I figured I'd take the next exit, find a phone, call it in. That next exit came up quicker than it should have. I'd run this road for 20 years and never noticed the little green sign before. CR 606, Wolf Creek, 2 miles. The ramp curved sharp down through a tunnel of dripping laurel, gravel instead of pavement, washboards rattling the empty trailer. My GPS lost signal the second I turned off the highway.
I expected the road to spit me out at a farmhouse or a church, but it just narrowed, trees crowding closer, branches scraping the mirrors like fingernails. After 5 miles, the gravel turned to dirt, then to 2 ruts with grass growing down the middle. I started getting that tight feeling in my gut, the one that says turn around now, but there wasn't room. Pines pressed in so thick the headlights barely reached 20 feet. The road ended at a rusted cattle gate hanging open. Beyond it, a clearing on a little rise, and in the clearing, a graveyard I hadn't seen since I was 19 years old. Same crooked picket fence, same cedar trees grown huge now. My headlights swept across the stones and I knew every name before I read them. Gentry, McCoy, Sutphin, all the old families from the headstones leaning like tired men. I'd buried my own granny here in the summer of '99, the week before I got my CDL. Stood right over there by the holly tree while the preacher read from Psalms and the cicadas screamed like banshees. I hadn't been back since the day we filled the hole. I sat frozen, hands locked on the wheel. The rain had eased to a steady hiss. The girl, Ruthie, was gone. Door still closed, window still up, seatbelt still buckled, but empty. No wet footprints on the floor mat, no water anywhere. Just a bunch of Mayapples resting on the seat where she'd been, leaves glossy and perfect, fruit bright as late summer suns. I could smell them, sweet and wrong, like honeysuckle left too long in a closed room. I don't remember getting out of the truck. Next thing I knew, I was standing in the mud in front of Granny's stone. The engraving was worn, but I could still read it in the headlights. Lucille Gentry, 1918-1999, gone home. Someone had laid a handful of fresh Mayapples at the base, still wet from the rain, blooming out of season. My knees gave out. I went down hard in the red clay, hands sinking into it like it remembered me. I cried then, first time in years, big, ugly sobs that hurt my throat. I'm not proud of it, but there it is. When I finally climbed back in the cab, the clock read 2:47 a.m. I'd been parked less than 10 minutes, but the dash said I'd driven 37 miles off route. I turned the rig around slow, expecting the road to vanish, expecting to wake up, but the ruts were still there, leading me back out the way I came. When I hit the interstate again, the exit sign was gone, just smooth shoulder and guardrail like it had never existed. I still have those Mayapples. They never wilted. I put them in a coffee can on the dash and they stayed green and blooming for months, until one morning outside Coxville they were just brown dust. Sometimes when the rain sets in hard and I'm rolling these mountain roads alone, I smell them again, sweet and green and impossible. And sometimes in the sweep of the wipers, I see a little bare footprint on the inside of the windshield, red clay still wet. I never take that stretch in the rain anymore. I take the long way, add the hours, pay the fuel. Because I know whose house I was headed to that night, and I know she was right. Sooner or later, every one of us is going to Granny's house, and little Ruthie will be standing on the shoulder with her hand out, waiting to show us the way.
I picked up the load in South Charleston just after dusk on a Thursday in November. One of those raw, wet evenings when the Kanawha River smells like cold smoke and dead fish. Sealed trailer, no bill of lading to look at, just a set of papers that said 38,000 pounds even, destination Roanoke, cold storage by 0600. Dispatcher called it special freight, which usually means somebody's paying triple to keep questions to a minimum. I didn't ask. I'd been flat broke for 2 weeks, and the money was too good to get curious about. The rain started before I hit the interstate, soft at first, then harder, the kind that turns the world into gray soup. By Beckley, it was coming sideways, wind rocking the empty trailer behind me like it wanted to dance. I stopped at the Tamarack for coffee and a reset, weighed the rig on the cat scale out of habit. Ticket spit out 38,020. Close enough. I snapped a picture, sent it to dispatch, and rolled south again on 77. First hint something was wrong came outside of Princeton. The rig felt sluggish climbing the grade, like the engine had lost a cylinder. I chalked it up to the wind and the wet. But when I crested the hill and started down the long grade toward Rocky Gap, the trailer brakes grabbed harder than they should have, and the whole outfit settled lower on the airbags. I glanced at the mirror. The trailer looked heavier. The tires were squatted, sidewalls bulging the way they do when you're maxed out. I told myself it was just water in the frame rails. Happens sometimes. An hour later, I hit the bland scale house. Rain was pounding so hard the trooper inside barely looked up when I rolled across the platform. The digital sign flashed 41,600. I stared at it like it had insulted my mother. I'd gained almost 4,000 pounds in 90 miles, and I hadn't stopped once. I pulled around back, parked under the floodlights, and called dispatch. The night guy swore up and down the bill hadn't changed. No hot loads added, no paperwork errors. Maybe your axles are iced up, he said, but we both knew that was nonsense. I hung up and sat there listening to water drum on the roof, feeling the cab sway every time a gust hit. The rig was riding so low the frame rails were almost kissing the mud flaps. I kept driving. Fancy Gap was coming, the long, twisting drop off the mountain, where breaks cook and runaways happen. I didn't like the idea of going down that grade overweight in a monsoon. Every mile the feeling got worse. The steering got heavier, the engine lugged like it was pulling a house. I stopped again at the pull-off just north of the big descent, the one with the picnic tables nobody ever uses. By then the scale ticket from my phone app said 44,120, 6,000 pounds heavier than Charleston and climbing steady. The trailer sat so low the landing gear was dragging sparks when I turned in.
I killed the engine and sat in the sudden quiet. Rain hissed on the hot exhaust, ticking as it cooled. I told myself I'd pop the seals, look inside, proved myself it was still empty. Maybe a shift in the air ride, maybe water in the tanks. Anything but what my skin was telling me. I grabbed the flashlight, pulled my hood up, and walked back through the downpour. The mud sucked at my boots. The trailer doors were still sealed with the red plastic bolt I'd snapped on myself in Charleston. I cut it with my knife, hands shaking from cold or something else, and rolled the doors up. Empty. Just the scuffed aluminum floor, a few old tie-down straps, and the echo of rain on the roof 30 feet above. I swept the light corner to corner, half expecting pallets that weren't on the manifest, half expecting nothing at all. That's when I saw the print. One single boot print in the center of the floor, wet red clay, size maybe 10 or 11, heel deep like the weight of a grown man had pressed it there. The tread was old-fashioned, square lugs like the Red Wings my daddy wore in the 80s. The print pointed straight toward the nose of the trailer, toward the cab, like whoever made it had been walking out when they changed their mind. I stood there long enough for the rain to soak me through. No other marks, no drag, no second print, just that one, perfect and deliberate. I closed the doors, snapped a new seal without thinking, and climbed back in the cab. The seat was warm, like someone had just been sitting in it. I hadn't left the heater on. I started the engine and sat staring at the muddy print in my mind, the way it pointed at me like an accusation. The rest of the night is broken pieces. I remember easing down Fancy Gap in third gear, Jake brake howling, praying the brakes didn't fade. I remember the rig groaning like it was in pain, springs squealing, tires hissing. Every time I glanced at the mirror, the trailer looked lower, like something inside was settling its weight. At Lambsburg, I pulled into the runaway ramp lot, parked under the lights, and opened the doors again. The print was still there, but now there were two. Same boot, same direction, 6 feet closer to the cab. The floor around them was bone dry. I drove the last 70 miles to Roanoke with hammer down, crying like a baby and not caring who saw. When I backed into the receiver's dock at 5:47 a.m., the scale read 48,004. They cut the seal, rolled the doors up, and found nothing but that single line of red clay boot prints marching straight to the bulkhead. 12 prints total, evenly spaced like a man walking slow. The receiver refused the load. Dispatch told me to deadhead home and not speak a word to anyone. I did what I was told. I never hauled another seal trailer out of Charleston. I quit that company the next week and took a local job running aggregate out of Radford, daylight only. But some nights when the rain sets in hard and the roads shine black, I feel the seat beside me sag, just a little, like someone heavy sat down quiet. I never look over. I just keep my eyes on the white line and pray the load stays light, because whatever hitched a ride that night is still walking, one deliberate step at a time, and I don't think it's done adding weight yet.
I had been rolling south on I-77 out of Whitefield, empty trailer rattling behind me like loose bones, when the rain finally caught up. It had been threatening all evening, low black clouds boiling over the ridges, but around 1 in the morning it let go. Not a shower, a wall of water that turned the windshield into a moving river and the highway into a mirror. I dropped to 50, then 45, hazards blinking, trying to keep the white line in sight. There wasn't another soul on the road. Even the coal trucks had pulled off. Just me and the dark and the sound of tires hissing through standing water. I noticed the headlights somewhere past Big Walker Mountain Tunnel. At first, I thought it was heat lightning playing tricks, just a flicker in the mirror. But then they settled steady, 2 pale eyes hanging back about a quarter mile. No marker lights, no amber clearance lamps, just headlights only, like an older car or a truck running blacked out. I didn't think much of it. Sometimes locals ride dark to keep the troopers off them. I kept my speed, and the lights kept theirs. Perfect distance, perfect pace. Something about it itched at me, but I was tired, and the kind of tired that makes everything feel a little unreal. I eased off the throttle just to see what they'd do. Down to 35, 30, slow enough that the trailer started to sway. The lights dropped back the same amount, never closer, never farther. I rolled the window down an inch, let the cold rain slap my face to wake up, then pushed it back up to 70. The lights climbed right with me, smooth as if we were hooked together by cable. My skin started crawling, the way it does when you realize you're being watched from the tree line and can't see who's watching. I told myself it was nothing. Just another driver running the same lonely stretch. Happens all the time. The next exit was 17, Hillsville, Galax. I clicked the turn signal more out of habit than plan. Took the ramp slow because the water was running across it like a creek. The headlights followed. Not fast, not slow, just took the same curve I did, tires hissing the same note. I turned left under the overpass toward town, figuring I'd loop back north if I had to, lose 'em on the secondary roads. The lights turned left too. Now my heart was kicking. I sped up, took the first right onto a farm road I knew dead-ended at an old tobacco barn, pulled into the gravel lot, mud flying, and shut everything down. Engine off, lights off, key out of the ignition. Sat there in the sudden quiet, rain drumming hard on the roof, watching the mirror. The headlights rolled in slow, stopped maybe 50 yards behind me, pointed straight at my back doors. No silhouette in the windshield, no dome light when the door opened, nothing. Just those 2 beams cutting through the downpour like they were bored into the dark. I waited for a door slam, for footsteps, for anything. 10 minutes, 15. Nothing moved. The rain got harder, if that was possible. My breath fogged the glass.
I told myself to chill. Probably just kids screwing around, or some drunk who thought he knew me. But the lights never wavered, never blinked. After a while, I couldn't stand it. I fired the engine, flipped my own headlights on bright, and started rolling again. The second I moved, those beams behind me went dark. Gone, like somebody flipped a switch. I drove white-knuckled back to the interstate, checking the mirrors every 3 seconds. Nothing but rain and my own taillights glowing red in the puddles. I told myself that was the end of it. Took the ramp to N60, merged south, and tried to put miles between me and whatever that had been. I was shaken so bad I had to pull the seatbelt away from my chest to breathe. Somewhere past Lambsburg, the itch came back. I glanced up, and there they were again, farther back this time, hanging in the mirror like they'd never left. Same distance, same pace. Closer than before, maybe 200 yards. I could almost make out the shape now. Older, boxy truck, and the wind. The lights stayed right with me. I slammed the brakes, dropped to 40 in a heartbeat, trailer jackknifing. The lights slowed the same graceful amount. I sped up again. They sped up. It wasn't a chase. It was a follow. Patient, unhurried. Like whatever was driving knew I had nowhere to go but forward. I didn't stop again until the big Petro at Raffine, 40 miles later. Pulled in fast, took the first spot under the floodlights where 20 other rigs sat idling like sleeping animals. I parked nose out, left the engine running, hazards blinking, and sat there till sunrise with the doors locked and the tire thumper across my lap. Never saw the headlights again that night. Fell asleep sometime after 4 with the cab light on and the radio turned to static for company. Morning came gray and dripping. The lot was full. Drivers coming and going, coffee cups steaming in the cold. I climbed down stiff, walked around back to check my mud flaps and seals, and that's when I saw them. Handprints. Dozens of them, all over the back doors and the ICC bumper, smeared in red clay like somebody had pressed both palms flat and dragged downward. Not random either. Every print faced inward toward the handle, fingers curled like they'd been trying to get in. The clay was wet, fresh, the kind you only find deep in the woods after a hard rain. I looked around. Every other trailer in the row was clean, beaded with nothing but rainwater. Mine looked like it had been climbed by something desperate to ride inside. I hosed them off 3 times with a squeegee bucket. They came back the next night it rained, and the next. Always the same prints, always fresh, always reaching. I sold that trailer in Greensboro a month later, bought a new one, different color, different number. Still find them sometimes when the weather turns. I'll wake up at a truck stop in Tennessee or North Carolina, and there they'll be. Wet red clay handprints sliding down the back doors like tears, fingers curled the same way, patient as ever. I don't run I-70 south of Whitefield when it's raining anymore. Some nights I take the long way around on 52 and sleep in the cab with the curtains drawn and the dome light burning. Because whatever was behind me that night never passed me. It's still back there, keeping perfect pace, waiting for the night I get too tired or too lonely to keep running. And when that night comes, I reckon those hands will finally open the doors.
The West Virginia Turnpike in a hard rain is about the loneliest stretch of road I know. 48 miles of mountain grades and switchbacks, tunnels punched through rock, and guardrails that look like toothpicks holding back the dark. I was running north out of Beckley that night in March of 2018 with a load of sheet steel for a warehouse in Charleston, trying to beat the storm that had been dogging me since Tennessee. By the time I hit the toll plaza at Chillian, the sky cracked open and never closed again. Rain came down so thick the headlights barely cut 20 feet, and the wipers were on full frantic, slapping back and forth like they were trying to fight the water off. I'd been rolling for 16 hours straight, eyes burning, shoulders locked, coffee gone cold hours ago. The radio had given up somewhere south of Princeton, only static and the occasional ghost of a gospel station that sounded like it was broadcasting from underwater. The only company I had was the rhythmic squeak of the blades and the low growl of the Cummins pulling the grade up toward Hawk's Nest. I kept telling myself, just get to the top, then it's mostly downhill to the flat. But the storm didn't care about my plans. It started small. I'd catch a pattern in the water streaks, the way the blades bushed it around. Thought it was just fatigue making shapes out of nothing, like seeing faces in clouds. But after a while, the pattern kept repeating. Same letters every sweep, clear as if someone had finger-written them in the film of rain. H-E-L-P-M-E. Over and over, perfect block letters, appearing and vanishing with each pass of the rubber. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes with the heel of my hand, looked again. Still there. I laughed out loud, a dry bark that echoed in the empty cab. Getting old, Ray, I told myself, hallucinating from lack of sleep. But the letters kept forming, steady as a heartbeat. I slowed a little, let the truck coast, watching the windshield like it was a drive-in movie. The passenger side blades started skipping, the way they do when the rubbers weren't thin.
It stuttered once, twice, then quit altogether, stuck straight up like a broken arm. The driver's side blade kept going alone, sweeping the left half of the glass in a lonely half circle. And that's when the message changed. The water rearranged itself under the single blade, slower now, deliberate. Toolate. Each letter lingered longer than it should have, hanging there like breath on cold glass before the rain dragged it away. Then the driver blade froze too, parked right in the middle of the E, leaving the words smeared across the windshield in dripping streaks. I slammed the dash with my fist, scared and mad at the same time. The motor whined. The blades jerked once like something had startled them, then went limp again. I hit the washer button. Fluid sprayed. The blades twitched, but the letters stayed, darker now, like they'd been etched. My skin felt too tight. I could smell river water in the cab, cold and muddy, even though both vents were closed and the heater was blowing hot. The curve coming up fast, the big one right before the overlook where the new river drops away 1,000 feet into nothing. I eased off the throttle, downshifted, let the Jake brake growl. The road was a black ribbon slick as oil, guardrail flashing by in silver bursts. That's when I saw the flares, orange dots in the rain, 3 of them, then the silhouette of a wrecked tractor trailer halfway through the guardrail, cab tilted nose down into the gorge, trailer jackknifed and twisted like a snapped bone. State trooper lights strobed red and blue through the downpour, but no officers in sight, just the wreck and the rain and the smell of diesel mixing with wet earth. I pulled onto the shoulder 100 yards short, hazards blinking, heart hammering so hard I could taste it. Walked back slow, boots sliding on the gravel, shining my flashlight down the embankment. The cab was empty, door hanging open, seatbelt dangling like a tongue. No blood I could see, but the windshield was starred in the middle, long cracks radiating out like a spider web. Trooper finally came jogging up the hill, rain cape flapping, face pale under the brim of his hat. Asked if I'd seen anything. I told him I just got there. He nodded, told me the driver had gone off sometime after midnight, called it in himself on the CB before he lost control. They'd found the rig an hour later, but no sign of the man. River was running too high and fast to search till morning. Name on the manifest was Leonard McCoy, ran for the same company I did out of Bluefield. I knew Lenny, quiet guy, liked bluegrass music, always had a picture of his little girl taped above the visor. We'd shared coffee at the Petro more than once. I stood there in the rain a long time after the trooper went back to his cruiser. The windshield of Lenny's truck was still intact enough to read the faint streaks the wipers had left before they quit. Same block letters, same message, HELPME. Then lower down where the single blade had kept going, TOOLATE. The glass was cracked right through the middle of the final E, like something had punched it from the inside. I drove the rest of the way to Charleston with the wipers off, rain sheeting straight down the windshield so I could barely see. Didn't matter. I knew the road by heart, every curve, every drop. Delivered the steel at dawn, signed the bills, and never told a soul what I'd seen written in water. Replaced both wiper blades in the shop that afternoon. New motor, new arms, new rubber. First hard rain we got after that, I was parked at a rest area eating a sandwich when the blades started moving on their own, slow, like they were tired. Passenger side quit first, then the driver's side spelled it out one last time, real careful. HECOMING. I unbolted the whole assembly and threw it in a dumpster behind the pilot in Withfield. Bought a new truck the next spring, different color, different company. Still, when the big storms roll down off the mountains and the wipers start their rhythm, I catch myself watching the glass, waiting for the letters to form. Sometimes I hear Lenny's voice under the slap of the blades, faint, patient, asking for the help that never came in time, and I wonder how long it'll be before my own blades freeze and spell the words I already know by heart.
I'd been running coal out of the Itman mine all week, black dust in every pore. And by Friday night, I was ready to point the nose south and not stop till I smelled Carolina barbecue. It was late October 2020, the kind of raw, wet cold that sneaks under your collar and stays there. I just cleared Princeton on I-77 when the sky tore open. Rain came down so hard it felt like the mountain was trying to drown the highway. Visibility went to nothing. I was steering by memory and the faint glow of the cat's eyes. Nobody else on the road but me and the wind rocking the empty trailer like it wanted to dance. I was doing maybe 40, crawling, when the headlights caught a flash of white sliding sideways across both lanes. Old Dodge church van, the kind every little Baptist congregation had back in the 80s, white with a faded blue stripe and a hand-painted Mount Olive Baptist, Beckley, West Virginia, still visible on the side. It hit the standing water, tires locked, and went into a slow, sickening spin. I saw the brake lights flare once, then it clipped the guardrail, flipped, and rolled down the embankment like a toy somebody got tired of. Metal screamed, glass popped, and it disappeared into the dark in the laurel thicket below. My stomach dropped clean through the floorboards. I slammed the brakes, skidded to a stop half on the shoulder, and grabbed the mic. "Breaker, breaker, northbound 77, just south of Princeton. White church van just went off the road, rolled bad. Somebody get troopers and rescue rolling." Static answered. Then a sleepy voice from a pilot car somewhere behind me said he'd relay it. I left the hazards blinking, pulled my rain jacket on, and started down the hill. The mud was ankle-deep red clay, slick as grease. I half slid, half fell the 30 yards to where the van lay on its roof, wheels still spinning slow. Steam hissed from the crumpled hood, mixing with the rain. I yelled the whole way down. "Anybody hurt? Can you hear me?" But only the storm answered. When I got close, I swept the flashlight across the wreckage. Driver's door was sprung open, windshield starred but holding, side windows gone. I braced for blood, for screams, for the awful quiet that means the worst. Instead, I got nothing. The cab was empty. No driver, no passengers. Seats were all there, 15 or 16 of them, the old vinyl kind cracked from years of Sunday mornings, and every single seat had a wet hymn book lying open, pages flapping in the wind like trapped birds. Every book was turned to the same song, "Shall We Gather at the River?" Water ran across the words, but I could still read them clear. The books looked old, leather covers swollen, some of the pages coming loose, but the ink hadn't run the way fresh print would. I stood there in the downpour, shining my light from seat to seat, waiting for somebody to groan or move. Nothing. No blood on the steering wheel, no drag marks in the mud outside the doors, no footprints leading away into the woods. Just those hymnals, soaked through, all open to the same verse about the river that flows by the throne of God. I climbed back up the bank slower than I went down, legs shaking, telling myself maybe they'd all crawled out and walked for help. But the mud was smooth as fresh butter except for my own boot prints coming down. No tire tracks on the shoulder either, just mine and the long gouges where the van had left the road. When I got to the cab, I was breathing hard, rain dripping off my hat brim. I reached for the mic to give a better location, and that's when I heard it. Music. Soft at first, then louder, filling the cab like the windows were down in church on a summer night. A piano and a congregation singing in 4-part harmony. "Shall we gather at the river, where bright angel feet have trod?" Same hymn, same key, same slow tempo you hear at funerals when they lower the casket. My blood turned to ice water. The radio was off. Had been off since Beckley because the antenna got ripped half loose by a low branch outside Jaeger. I'd even pulled the fuse so it wouldn't drain the batteries. Yet the song played clear and sweet, voices rising and falling like they were right there beside me. I yanked the door panel open, stared at the dead radio face. No lights, no static, nothing. But the music kept going, verse after verse, until it reached the last chorus and faded gentle, the way it does when the preacher says amen. Then silence, except for the rain. I sat there a long time, soaked to the bone, afraid to touch the key. Troopers showed up 20 minutes later, 2 cars sliding in with lights cutting red-blue tunnels through the storm. I walked back down with them. The van was gone. Not towed. Gone. Just a long scar of torn earth and broken laurel where it had rolled, and even that looked older, like it had happened days ago instead of minutes. One of the troopers asked what kind of vehicle I'd seen. I described it best I could. He shook his head, said there'd been no calls, no wrecks reported all night. Dispatch confirmed the same when I got them on the phone. I never told them about the hymn books or the singing. They'd have written me up for fatigue or worse. I drove the rest of the way home with the radio fuse still pulled and the windows cracked so the cab wouldn't feel so closed in. Every time I crossed a creek or a river, I caught myself listening for voices under the sound of the tires. Still do. Some Sunday mornings, when the fog hangs low in the valleys and the church steeples rise out of it like they're floating, I'll hear a snatch of that hymn on the wind. Never loud, just enough to raise the hair on my arms. And sometimes, parked at a shipper with the engine off, I'll find a single wet page stuck to the windshield, words bleeding but readable. Yes, we'll gather at the river. I don't know whose van it was, or when it really went off the road, but I know they were trying to get home, and the river took them before they made it. And every time the rain sets in hard on the mountains, I wonder if they're still riding, looking for someone to carry them the rest of the way, because the song never quite finishes. It just waits for the next storm to start again. I was running a load of Christmas trees out of Ashe County, North Carolina, headed for a lot in Richmond, late November 2015. The kind of cold, wet night that makes the mountains feel like they're closing their fist around you. I'd left Boone around 9, figuring I'd push through the fog or no fog, because the money was good and the house payment was late again. The rain started as a mist on the parkway, then thickened into something heavier, until the high beams just bounced back at me like I was driving inside a milk bottle. By the time I dropped down toward Deep Gap, the fog was so dense I couldn't see the hood ornament. I slowed to 30, then 20, crawling along with my four-ways blinking, praying nobody came up behind me doing 80. That's when the voice started. It didn't come over the CB or the radio. Those were dead, just soft static. It came through the dash fence, low and calm, the way the lady on my GPS talks when she's not mad at me yet. Male voice though, older, familiar in a way I couldn't place. In half a mile, turn left, clear as Sunday preaching. I laughed out loud, nervous, figuring the lack of sleep had finally cracked me. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours in 2 days, but the fog was so thick I couldn't see the next reflector post, and something in the voice sounded like it knew where it was going. So when the half mile felt about right, I slowed and turned left onto what I hoped was a road. Gravel crunched under the tires. The fog swallowed the highway behind me like it had never existed. The voice came again, patient. Stay straight for 2 miles. I did. Pines pressed close on both sides. I could hear branches scraping the trailer like fingernails. My skin started crawling, but I kept rolling because stopping felt worse. Bear right at the forked pine. I did. Left at the oak with the hollow trunk. I did. Each instruction came exactly when I needed it. Never rushed, never loud, just a quiet certainty that made the hair on my neck stand up. I tried talking back, asked who was there, where we were going, but the voice never answered questions. It only gave directions. Time got strange. The clock on the dash said I'd been driving 20 minutes, but the odometer claimed 43 miles. The road narrowed to 1 lane, then to dirt, then to twin ruts with grass down the middle. I should have turned around, but every time I thought about it, the voice spoke again, gentle, almost kind. Stay on the path. Almost there. My hands were sweating inside my gloves. I told myself I was lost in the Jefferson National Forest, or maybe Nantahala, that I'd find a wide spot, lock the doors, and wait for daylight. But the voice kept guiding, and I kept obeying, like a child being walked home by someone he trusts. The fog thinned all at once, the way it does when you come off a ridge. I rolled into a clearing and stopped. My headlights lit up a sagging 2-story farmhouse with peeling white paint and a tin roof gone red with rust. Porch swing hanging by one chain, windows dark except for the single yellow bull burning over the front door. I knew that porch, knew the way the steps sagged in the middle, knew the scuppernong vine that used to grow up the left side, knew the exact lean of the chimney where Daddy always said it would fall someday and never did. I was parked in the yard of the house I grew up in, outside Clintwood, Virginia, 300 miles and 50 miles from where I turned off the highway, 3 states and a lifetime away. The house had been condemned since 1996, the year Mama died and the bank took it. Roof caved in years ago, windows shot out by kids with .22s, kudzu swallowing the porch whole. Yet there it stood, whole again, porch light glowing soft like somebody was expecting company for supper. I sat frozen behind the wheel, engine idling, breath fogging the windscreen. The voice spoke one last time, softer now, almost proud. "Welcome home, son." I knew that voice then. It was Daddy's, the same slow drawl he used when he called me in from the fields at dusk. Daddy who went into the ground when I was 14, buried up the hill behind the barn with a cedar stump for a marker because we couldn't afford stone. I killed the engine. The silence rushed in, broken only by the tick of cooling metal and the soft patter of leftover rain on the leaves. I don't remember getting out, but suddenly I was standing in the yard, boots sinking into the same red clay I played in as a boy. The porch boards didn't creak when I stepped on them. The screen door opened easy, no squeak, like somebody oiled the hinges yesterday. Inside smelled of wood smoke and coffee and the lemon oil Mama used on the furniture. The living room looked exactly like it did the day we left. Same green couch with the burn mark from Daddy's cigarette, same console television with the rabbit ears, same picture of Jesus knocking on the door hanging crooked about the fireplace. Only everything was too clean, too quiet, like the house had been waiting under a glass bell for 19 years. I walked through the rooms calling their names, Mama, Daddy, even my sister Ruth who drowned in the creek when we were little. Nobody answered, but I felt them there, in the corners of my eyes, in the way the curtains moved when there was no wind. In the kitchen, the percolator was still warm. A single coffee cup sat on the table, half full. Lipstick on the rim, the same Mama always wore. I backed out slow, heart hammering so hard I thought it would crack a rib. When I stepped off the porch, the fog rolled back in, thick as wool. I stumbled to the truck, climbed in, and started the engine with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't look back. I just drove straight, following the ruts the way I'd come, praying the voice would guide me out again. It didn't speak this time. The road widened, turned to gravel, then pavement, and suddenly I was back on 421 just outside Boone. Tractor trailer pointed north like nothing had happened. The clock read 11:47 p.m. I'd lost almost 3 hours. I still drive those mountains. I have to. It's how I eat. But when the fog comes down thick and the rain starts whispering through the vents, I pull over and wait, because I know what's waiting on the other side of the mist.
Porch light burning, coffee still warm, family I lost waiting quiet in the dark. And one of these nights I'm going to be too tired to keep running, and I'll turn left when the voice tells me to. I'll pull into that yard again, and this time I won't leave. The house remembers me, and I'm afraid, deep down, that I remember it too.
The rain started just past Bastion, a cold, steady pour that turned Route 52 into a black ribbon with no edges. I was hauling an empty flatbed back to Bristol after dropping a load of lumber in Bluefield, running light and fast, trying to make it home before the weather got ugly. It got ugly anyway. By the time I crossed the state line into Tazewell County, the wipers couldn't keep up, and the only fools and freight dogs were still moving. I was both that night, running on black coffee and spite, telling myself one more hour and I'd be in the driveway with the porch light waiting. I first noticed him in the passenger side mirror, the big West Coast one that shows the whole side of the trailer. A flicker at first, just a darker shape against the dark, but when the lightning flashed, I saw him clear. A man standing dead center in the empty bed of my flatbed, soaked through, arms hanging loose at his sides, face tilted up like he was letting the rain wash it clean. No rain gear, no hat, just a plain work shirt and jeans clinging to him like wet paper. He didn't sway when the trailer swayed. He just stood there staring straight into the mirror, straight into me. I jerked the wheel hard enough to send the chains rattling and stood on the brakes, the rig fishtailed, tires howling, and I came to a stop half on the shoulder with the hazards blinking red into the downpour. Heart hammering, I grabbed the mag light and jumped out, boots splashing in ankle-deep runoff. Walked the length of the trailer, shining the light up into the bed. Nothing. Not a footprint, not a drop of water different from the rain. The chains were still tight, the deck slick and empty. I even climbed up and walked it end to end, telling myself it was a trick of the light, a reflection off the whale aluminum, anything. Came down, shaking my head, feeling stupid and relieved at the same time. I no sooner than I got back in the cab and pulled onto the road than I saw him again. Same mirror, same place, standing calm in the middle of the bed. Lightning flashed and his face was closer this time, pale, eyes hollow, mouth set like a man who'd already made peace with something awful. I didn't break again. I just stared, knuckles white on the wheel, telling myself mirrors lie in weather like this. I reached up and flipped the mirror in toward the door so I couldn't see him anymore. Kept driving. 10 miles later, I hit a long, straight stretch outside of Cedar Bluff, where the water stood in big sheets on both sides of the road. Every puddle I passed threw my own reflection back at me. Headlights, grill, trailer, and behind the trailer, him, standing in the bed, soaked, staring. With every puddle he was closer, first at the tail, then halfway up the frame, then 3/4. Always the same distance from the back of the cab, no matter how fast I went. I tried the CB, begging somebody, anybody to talk me down, but the only answer was hiss and the occasional burst of gospel bleeding through the static. The rain never let up. The wipers kept time like a frantic heartbeat. I passed the Welcome to Tennessee sign, doing 90, praying the state line would break whatever this was. The last big puddle before the line stretched 20 feet across, black glass under the headlights. I saw him clear as day in it, right behind the cab, one pale hand reaching forward, fingers almost touching the back wall of the sleeper. His mouth was open like he was trying to speak, but no sound came, just rain pouring through him like he was made of smoke. I crossed the line doing 110, trailer whipping, and the reflection vanished. I didn't slow down until I hit the TA in Bristol, pulled under the floodlights with the other night crawlers, and sat there till sunrise with every light in the rig burning. When the rain finally stopped, I walked back to check the trailer one more time. The bed was clean except for a single wet handprint on the rear header, fingers splayed, palm down, water still beaded on the steel like it had been placed there seconds ago. I hosed it off 3 times. It came back the next night it rained, and the next, always in the same spot, always fresh. I sold that trailer 6 months later, bought a new one, different color, different numbers. Still see him sometimes when the weather closes in, standing in the reflection of a puddle or the chrome of a fuel tank, patient, soaked, closer every mile. He never quite catches up, but he never falls behind either. And when the rain starts drumming on the roof, I keep my eyes on the road and my speed up, because I know one of these nights I'm gonna look in the mirror, and he'll be standing right behind the seat, hand on my shoulder, ready to ride the rest of the way home.
I was running on fumes and pure stubbornness that night in early April, somewhere south of Beckley on I-77. I'd left Jacksonville at sunup with a load of oranges bound for Pittsburgh, and the plan had been to fuel in Wytheville, but the card reader at the pump was down and the line inside looked like a soup kitchen. Figured I'd catch the next big station, but the next big station never came.
By the time the low fuel lights started blinking, I was doing math in my head and losing. The gauge was kissing empty, and the mountains don't care how good your intentions are. That's when I saw the sign. It was half hidden by kudzu, metal so rusted the numbers looked like dried blood. Exit 97. No town name, no services diamond, just the number and an arrow pointing right. I'd run this stretch for 15 years and never noticed it, but I was tired and the needle was past E, so I took it. The ramp curved sharp down through a tunnel of wet pines, no lights, no reflectors, just 2 lanes of cracked asphalt narrowing fast. I remember thinking it felt older than the interstate itself, like it had been poured when Eisenhower was still a general and then forgotten. Asphalt gave way to gravel, then to dirt the color of dried liver. Branches scraped the roof like they were testing the paint. My headlights picked out ruts deep enough to swallow a pickup, water standing in them from the rain that had chased me all day. I kept waiting for the road to spit me out at a little country store or a house with a single pump out front, the kind you still find tucked in the hollers. Instead, the trees opened, and I rolled into a clearing no bigger than a churchyard. 1 island, 2 old gravity pumps under a sagging tin canopy. A cinder block building the size of a single wide, paint long gone, just gray wood showing through. 1 yellow bulb on a gooseneck pole buzzing and flickering over the door. Hand-lettered sign above the pumps read Standard Oil Products, in letters so faded they looked embarrassed to still be there. The place should have been torn down in the 70s, but the light was on, and the pumps looked like they still worked. I killed the engine and sat there a minute listening to the rain tick on the roof. No other cars, no houses in sight, just the dark wall of woods pressing in. I told myself I was dreaming, but the kind of dream you have when you're too tired to know you're asleep. Then the door of the station creaked open, and an old man stepped out. He was tall and thin, wearing a gray work shirt with red stitching that might once have said a name. Skin like wet parchment, eyes milky but sharp. He moved slow, like his joints hurt, but he moved. Walked straight to the pump, picked up the nozzle like he'd done it 10,000 times, and stuck it in my tank without asking. The pump clattered and dinged the old mechanical way, numbers rolling slow. I rolled the window down. "How much do I owe you?" He didn't answer right away, just kept his hand on the nozzle, staring past me into the cab like he was looking for someone else riding shotgun. When the tank clicked off, he hung the hose back, wiped his hands on a rag that hadn't been cleaned since Korea, and finally spoke. Voice like dry leaves scraping concrete. "Tell them I'm still waiting." "Tell who?" He didn't explain, just turned and walked back inside. The bulb over the door flickered once and steadied. I sat there a minute expecting him to come back with a receipt or a credit card machine or something, but the door stayed shut. I climbed down, walked over, and looked through the grimy window. Empty shelves, a counter, an old cash register with a drawer open and nothing in it. No old man, no back room, just dust and shadows and the smell of kerosene thick enough to chew. I got back in the cab and turned around. Same dirt track, same ruts, same dripping pines. 10 minutes later, I rolled up the ramp and merged onto I-77 South like I'd never left. No sign, no ramp, just shoulder and guardrail in the mountains swallowing the place I just left. I looked at the fuel gauge, needle sitting on F, steady as a preacher's promise. I didn't stop again until Knoxville, and when I did, the gauge still hadn't moved. 3 weeks later, it still hasn't. I've burned half a tank since then, I know I have, but the needle never drops. I looked up exit 97 on every map I could find, paper and digital. Nothing. Even the locals in Beckley act like I'm drunk when I ask. Some nights when the rain sets in and I'm rolling that stretch empty, I catch a glimpse of a rusted sign in the weeds, half the letters gone, and my heart tries to climb out my throat. I keep my speed up and my eyes forward, because I know if I slow down just enough, the ramp will be there again, and the old man will be waiting under that yellow bulb with the nozzle in his hand and the same quiet question in his eyes. I don't know who them is or what they're supposed to be told. All I know is the tank stays full and the dead feels heavier every mile. One of these nights I'm going to run out of road before I run out of guilt, and I'll take that exit for good. I can already hear the pump clattering in my sleep.